All right, you guys, so the first question on our test review says, study the quadratic equations below. Calculate the x-intercepts of the quadratic equation. Show all of your work. I know if it's asking for the x-intercepts, it's asking for the solutions. Okay, intercepts, roots, zeros, and solutions all mean the same thing. So it doesn't matter how you do it. You can factor it and solve. That's one way, is to factor and then solve for the zeros. Another way that we learned is the completing the square. Completing the square. Okay, and the first one, I'm going to complete the square because it looks like it's, I'm going to highlight it. It looks like it's all ready to set up for it. Where's my pen? I can't see it. There we go. Looks like it's all ready to set up for it. Let me make this. Okay, x squared minus 13x equals 30. So the way we complete the square is we do x squared, we just rewrite it, minus 13x plus, you leave a space there, equals 30. Then, in that space, we take half of 13, negative 13, which is negative 6.5, and then we square that, and we get positive 42.25. Okay, you can check it on the calculator. It should be what you get. And now I've changed the equation. I've added this much onto this side. So on the other side, I also need to add 42.25. So now, on my right-hand side of the equation, I have 72.25. And on this side of the equation, what I can do is I want to make this a thicker color here. I'm going to change this. I have made a perfect square, and I know that because I took half of 13 and squared it. So my perfect square ends up being, oh, what were we in purple? My perfect square ends up being x, half of negative 13 was negative 6.5 squared. Okay, so I took that negative 6.5 from up here. Okay, I took that negative 6.5, and that's what goes into my perfect square. Okay. Now it's easy to solve. I just take the square root of both sides, and that cancels out my squared, and I have x minus 6.5 equals the positive and negative square root of 72.25. And last step, to isolate x, to get it by itself, I add 6.5 to both sides. And 6.5 is not underneath this radical, so it just needs to stay on the outside. So I actually have x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 72.25 plus 6.5. So I have two answers. I have one that is positive square root of 72.25 plus 6.5. And my second root is negative square root of 72.25 plus 6.5. So let's use the calculator and figure out what numbers those actually are. You can leave it just like this. That's perfectly fine. I happen to know that that this one's factorable, so we should get some good answers. Okay, so in my calculator, I'm going to put the first one, so second squared, and I'm going to put 72.25, parenthesis, I have an old type of calculator on here, parenthesis, and then I'm going to add 6.5, and I get 15. So over here, x1 is the same as if I just had written 15. and x2. I'm going to do the same thing. So if I just hit second enter, it pops it up again. Then I go back. I'm just going to put a negative in front. And to do that, I have to do second insert negative. And I get -2. So my second answer is -2. So on a graph, it would cross at 15, -2. And because it's a positive x squared, it's going to be like a smiley face. Okay? All right, let's do the next one. The next one I'm going to factor. I'm going to do some erasing here. The next one I'm going to factor because it's set up perfectly for factoring. And I think it does. Factor. This is taking a while. I'm sorry, you guys. Okay. So we have 12x squared. So I'm working on this one. So I'm going to draw my box. And I'm going to put 12x squared here, -2 here, and then my x, 12 times -2, so 12 times -2. I'm going to put that answer here, which is -24. And then I'm going to grab the 5 from the middle, and I'm going to put that here. So two numbers that add up to -24, or I'm sorry, multiply it to be -24 and add up to be +5, I think is -3 and +8. So I'm going to put that back into my square, so -3x and +8x. So I've rewritten 5x as -3 and +8. Now I can start factoring. It doesn't matter where you start. I'm going to start here with my -2 and my +8. So I'm looking at this rectangle with these two squares in it. And I'm going to come below it and I'm going to say, okay, 2, the number 2 can go into 8 and into -2. So 2 times what is -2? That's -1, right? So I have -1 times 2 is -2. And then 2 times what is 8x? That's going to be 4x. Don't forget that x because the x is on the inside. So what have I just done? Let me get another color. I did 2 times 4 was equal to 4x is equal to 8x. And now I need to take -1 and I have to figure out what can I multiply it by to give me -3x. So obviously it's going to be just 3x, right? And then I can check, is 4x times 3x 12x squared? And yes it is. So I can rewrite this as, and let's do 0 because we still want to solve it, so we need to find our zeros. 0 is equal to, parenthesis, 3x plus 2 and 4x minus 1. Now I have to solve each of those middle ones. So let's start with the first one. 3x plus 2. And we will say, okay, how do I make 3x plus 2 equal to be 0? So I subtract 2 from both sides, and I get 3x equals -2. Then I divide both sides by 3, and I get one answer is -2/3, right? If I solved that, I get one answer is -2/3. Then let's look at the second one, 4x minus 1. How am I going to make that 0? So I have 4x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides. I get 4x equals 1. Divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals 1/4. So my two solutions, for this equation are negative 2/3 and positive 1/4. Okay, now let's just do the last one. Let's see if I can just erase the insides of my squares here. And we can just reuse it for the next one. That's cool. And in here, I'm not going to be able to get rid of all that. Oh! All of the highlighter. But why don't you start filling out, while you're watching me do this, why don't you start filling out the insides of your square with x squared and negative 32. And I'll just leave those because I know I'm going to have them again. So, x squared, negative 32. And if it's just an x squared with no number, it's just a 1, so I could just put negative 32 here. My middle term for here, I'm going to go positive 8, negative 4. 8 minus 4 is 4, and 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. So I'm going to have 8 x's, and I'm going to have 4 x's. Then I'm going to start, I don't know, why don't I start here? The greatest common factor that go into 32 and 8, and that is 8. Okay. 8 times what is negative 32? That's negative 4. So 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. And 8 times what gives me 8x, and that's just x. And then, oh, did you guys see what I did? I forgot to make this a negative 4 in the middle box there. And then x times negative 4 gives me negative 4x, and x times, oops, sorry, I did something wrong, didn't I? Negative 4 times x is negative 4x, and x times x is x squared. Okay, so I have on one side, at the bottom side, x minus 4, and on the other side I have x plus 8. Oh, this is easy. I don't even have to make any mini equations. I know that 4 minus 4 is 0, so x1 must be equal to positive 4. And I know that negative 8 plus 8 is 0. So this, x2, must be equal to negative 8. And those are my two solutions for this problem. All right, I'm going to stop this video, and I'm going to start a new one for the next set of questions.